big news in the NHL. I did mention it. Yesterday, we saw a double buyout. And I don't think we haven't seen too many contracts that are exactly the same when they're signed. And even less, I don't know if we've ever seen this before. I'm sure Sportsnet stats could tell us. But for the first time, I believe we saw two identical contracts bought out on the exact same day. They were signed on the same day. They were bought out on the same day. And those are Parise and Suter from the Minnesota Wild. Now, there is a lot to unpack here, but $15 million in dead cap is the number in a couple of years. This year they're going to, they gain a little bit. It's only going to cost them $2 million or something like that. The next year it's $12 million. The next year it's $14.74 million or something like that. And that's for 2 straight years. So you imagine a team trying to compete with $15 million in dead cap for 2 straight years. I don't know what prompted this or what started this, but it's a very interesting subject to get into. Now, first off, I think before we get to all of that, Stephen Dangle, you have had an axe to grind with the Minnesota Wild organization for a long, long time. And I'm just wondering,
I couldn't get past.
Can you stop hating them now that these 2 albatross contracts, although honestly, Suter's wasn't really that much of an albatross.
Not yet.
Can you stop hating the Minnesota Wild? Is it possible for you to find forgiveness?
Oh yeah, no, I'm done. Because I never in a million years. By the way, Suter and Parise only finished the first year of their contracts when this podcast began. That's how long we've been doing a podcast, and that's how long those contracts were.
They still had 4 years left, each of them.
It was wild. I saw a clip of ours where we were talking about the Minnesota Wild and those deals specifically, where we were talking about those deals being half done. That was 3 years ago. And they still had 4 years left by the end of it. They're unbelievable. And the idea that Parise was bought out, like you said, not that wild. Not that Minnesota even. But Suter getting bought out at the same time, same day. Shocking. I never would have imagined that in a million years. And that is why, how I vaguely, and I'm going to tie this to the Canucks, I've vaguely been like, you know what? I think Jim Benning is good at some aspects of his job. And that's why he should be fired, because he's been there for so long. And sometimes you just need a fresh set of eyes. The Minnesota Wild bring in a fresh set of eyes with Bill Garen. He's got no allegiance to those deals. He didn't sign them. He doesn't care. So he was able to actually see the bigger picture for the Minnesota Wild, what they're going to be for the next couple of years, what they're going to be in years 3 and 4. And he said, you know what? The best choice for my hockey team is to buy these 2 out. Doesn't matter if you agree with him, but the guy who signed those deals was never, ever going to do that because it's an admission of failure. But that guy's gone. He's long gone. So Bill Garen's the one making the tough decisions. And I got to say, I admire the big brass ones, as Elliot Friedman put it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of credit needs to be given to Bill Garen for what he's doing, because he's really he's taken everything from the old era and just gotten rid of it. If the names that he's since
not Matt Dumba.
Not Matt Dumba.
Not Matt Dumba.
We'll talk about that.
In 23 months, he's traded Zucker, Eric Stahl, and Devin Dubnyk, and then he didn't bring back Mikko Koivu. And then now he's cut ties with Parise and Suter. Like, that's just, he came in here and he saw what worked and what didn't. He's been here for long enough, 2 years, 24 months. And you see, okay, these guys are the leaders and it's not working. Maybe the locker room needs a change and needs to go over to the young guys. So we need to get rid of the old guard. Like, as long as Parise and Suter and Koivu were here, Garen clearly felt like there would never be a change in the locker room. And hockey's such a locker room sport, There's so much made of, hey, these guys get along together. And if he felt like it needed a serious culture change, this is cutting ties. So credit to him and going to like Craig Leopold, who clearly signed off on the original deals, and being like, hey, we need to do this, and getting his owner to actually convince him and be like, hey, here's the freedom, go ahead, I'll pay all of these millions of dollars to no one to play for my hockey team.
Well, and Craig Leopold was the owner of the Preds before he was the owner of the Wild, which is why Suter moved from Nashville to Minnesota in the first place. The thing that I want to ask you is that I think everybody can see why Parise was bought out. Everybody gets that.
Far past his best and not worth the $4
Something
million
like
cap it, like just not worth it.
Yeah. So, and we thought, when these contracts were signed, nobody thought, hey, they're going to be full value contracts all the way through.
No,
but the argument that
they might get some time.
When those 11 and 12-year deals were signed, a lot of people said, yeah, but they'll be retired by them. And all these players didn't retire. Mm-hmm. So they just kept going.
And it'd be worse if they retired, because then there's cap recapture, which hangs on your books even more.
Yes. So let me ask you this, okay? Can't move Parise, you got to buy him out. Explain Suter to me. Because when I look at Suter's stats, when I look at the role he plays, when I look at what he brings on the ice, this guy's still a top 4 defenseman in the league. And maybe he's not worth the contract that he is being paid for anymore. But tell me how he's worth $7 million, I guess $1 million in dead cap space this season, and then $6 the next year, and then $7 the next 2. How does that make sense? And I have a theory, but I wanted to ask because it beyond my theory, which really has no basis in anything, I don't understand that.
So there's a number of factors here, and I've extrapolated a lot. There was a 5-minute, 10-minute chunk from 31 Thoughts, especially, that I extrapolated a lot from. So Nick Leddy, and I promise I'll get back to the Wild. Trust me, it all relates. Nick Leddy with the New York Islanders, $5.5 million cap hit. A lot of people were comparing him to Duncan Keith because the Islanders are making him available. Wait a sec. What the hell? Why did you go out and get Duncan Keith at full rate when this guy was available?
And Duncan Keith signed for 2 years.
It's et cetera, et cetera. So the same has been said for Suter. Why did you simply not go out and get Suter? Well, one of the things that Fried said on the show is, would there be teams out there, and I'm paraphrasing, would there be teams out there willing to go get a guy like Nick Leddy? Of course. Is it a little rich? Yeah, maybe. Could you finagle it somehow? Maybe there's some retention, maybe this, maybe that. Yeah, maybe. But how many teams would be able to acquire Nick Leddy and then protect him? Or acquire him, protect him, and then not lose someone who they want to keep in the expansion draft, right? Seattle.
Buffalo.
Oh my God. Well, I was looking at their situation, and they're not going to lose anyone. I'm not sure if that's the good news or bad. Like, I couldn't tell. That's how bad the situation is there.
Not to use all of their slots. Can they just be like, hey, everyone's unprotected?
Dude, it ain't
Take
good.
Whatever. It's yours.
It ain't good.
We are going to bring them up, by the way. Sorry for bringing them up early, but we are going to have a segment on Buffalo.
Of course. So there's Nick Leddy. The other thing there with Suter is Fried said he based on what he knows, he does not think Suter would want to play in Canada. He's a big Hockey USA guy. He's an American, et cetera, et cetera. Now, separate from Fried, I have heard similar things. I don't think Ryan Suter would play in Canada. I don't think he wants to play in Canada. The no-move clause was a big deal because why didn't the Wild simply expose him? Expose him in the expansion draft? They can't because of the no-move.
But they could have asked.
They didn't ask.
That is confusing to me.
Right.
Because I assume based on that conversation, hey, like surely the Oilers knocked. Surely Ken Holland at least picked up the phone. Surely, but not. Also, if you see a guy with a no move clause and an MC next to their name and they don't play for a Canadian team, they don't want to play for a Canadian team. Brian Burke already said that. The 99% of guys in the league have their no moves almost specifically because of Canada. They can't afford the pay cut, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I mean, if you're a guy like Tavares, it's fine because Toronto's home. And this is where you're going to build your home forever and ever. Ryan Suter doesn't want to do that. I have a very difficult time believing he was never asked to waive his no move clause. Now, he might not have been asked recently. He might not have been asked, hey, can you waive it for Seattle purposes? Can you waive it for trade purposes? But I'm willing to bet over the years, at some point he was asked. Remember, there was an expansion draft a few years ago where this could have been addressed with Vegas. And I wonder if his answer remained the same.
Different GM, though.
Different GM. I wonder if he was boisterous about it because there were little allusions to butting of heads with leadership, Suter and Parise and Mikko Koivu. Again, this goes back to what Jesse said about the old guard and moving on from that. I think that's a very healthy thing for the Minnesota Wild. I think this is Bill Garen going, you know what? I'm not going to be able to trade this player because this player won't let me. So I'm going to do the one thing I can do, buy him out.
It does seem odd that you wouldn't just ask, though. There's no getting around that. Even if he sat in the dressing room, if he screamed it at the media, if he tattooed it on his chest, you still should ask the question.
Now, this is a guy who just hung up on his GM, though.
Okay. So he was mad he got bought out. But
because he didn't want to leave.
Right. So but it doesn't mean you don't call them and ask.
I assume Garen knew the answer.
But you still call and you still ask, guys. And you still try to explain, we need to keep Matt Dumba.
Perhaps you're right. Now, what we've talked about on the show, especially recently, is no move clause. Forget all that. It's basically I am choosing where I want to get traded clause.
Sure.
For some, it is actually a no move clause. I'm willing to bet it was a no move clause. No move clause for Ryan Suter. He didn't want to go anywhere. So Bill Garen did what he could, and he bought him out.
Adam, what was your theory?
My theory is that I think Steve, I guess, alluded to it. I didn't get a chance to catch 31 Thoughts today. Sounds like I might have been somewhat close. It seems like there's a personality issue. And I'm not talking about like somebody being a bad person. I'm talking about a difference of where this team is going. And it seems to me like even if all of what Steve said is true, I mean, losing Matt Dumba would be unacceptable. You just cannot lose him. But if I think there has to be more to this. Are you telling me a team wouldn't make room for a guy like Matt Dumba? I'll get rid of someone else. We'll take him. If you want to trade him, if you can't move Suter, there has to be something on a personal level here where Suter and Wild management did not get along.
I have a galaxy brain theory.
What is it?
Galaxy brain. So Minnesota's in like a truly unique situation. They're getting enormous cap relief this season.
Mm-hmm.
A little teeny bit of cap relief the next season. And then they're getting demolished 3 and 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm. For 3 straight years, 12, 14, 14.
Right. That is when they project the cap will likely start to go up. So that will help with a little bit of relief, but still, you're still going to get like hammered like $10 million against the cap. What if Bill Garen and the Minnesota Wild, this young, exciting Minnesota Wild team who got a sniff with their first round series against Vegas, they got a great chance to evaluate how good they are, how close they are to winning a series, maybe winning a few, and they project that they're going to be better. What if they absolute balls to the wall? Go for it. Absolutely 1,000 and billion% go for it for the next 2 years, especially this upcoming year, knowing full well, Last Dance style, but obviously completely different context, knowing full well that 3 years from now, they got to tear this shit down. They got to go right. They got to go. And that's when you trade Dumba. When he's done his prime or at the tail end of his prime. That's when you trade a player like him or a player like this guy or a player like that guy.
Spurgeon, maybe. I know he's the captain, but
that's a great name.
That's a big contract, right?
It's a big contract. They've written in stone the core of this team or a couple guys. Kaprizov, they're building around him.
Fiala.
No question. Yeah, to a lesser extent. But Kaprizov, who supposedly going to get an 8-year deal, and Eriksson Ek, who just got an 8-year deal. The other little tidbit that we heard is the Minnesota Wild and Bill Garen specifically want Jack Eichel bad. Can I just say, it's not the craziest strategy to go in there and pluck Jack Eichel away from a vulnerable Kevin Adams, have him for a couple years, absolutely go for it, and then when he still has plenty of value, trade him. I think it would be extremely, extremely interesting to see the Minnesota Wild go for it, maybe even get a star at the level of Jack Eichel, and then whether they win the cup or they don't, c'est la vie, in a couple years, you're going to have to make sacrifices.